Check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, sound check. Sound check, 1, 2, 3, sound check. Can everybody hear me pretty good? Not too loud, not too, okay. Would it make it more entertaining if they put a reverb on my voice for the evening? Special effects? All right. Is that good, Justin? Do you need more testing? Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Do you still need me to keep talking? Am I good? Okay, thank you. All right, bear with us. We're 2 minutes away from starting. We're just doing a final sound check. Am I reverbing when I get close to this thing? Okay. So I'll have to keep my distance. How's everybody doing tonight? Thank you for coming out. Do you guys know what we're talking about tonight? Yes, we're going to review. Last week was if Walt Disney made a, what was the name of the Walt Disney musical that they put out there, Fantasia? Well, WF puts out Dystopia. We're going to review Dystopia this evening. So just going to make sure that, are we a go-ahead, Justin? Yes, we are? Okay, perfect. All right, so welcome to this evening's lecture, those of you who are online and those of you who are in person. And like I said, we're going to just simply look back at last week's. They ran from May 22nd to 26th, I think. And it was the World Economic. Who here is familiar with the World Economic Forum? Right, this is the kind of crowd that we draw, right? You guys, I could probably randomly pick anybody from the crowd and have you teach most of what I'm going to teach tonight. So, but we still enjoy getting together, don't we? Okay, before we launch into it, as humans, we tend to look at the world and we look for patterns. And as we see patterns, we develop, our sciences. So the famous apple falling from the tree with Isaac Newton, although it never actually happened, is a perfect example of the laws of physics determined by observation. So we realize that objects unsupported always fall because of the law of gravity. Now every 8th or 4th grade science student has seen this. You take baking soda and mix it with vinegar and it fizzes, hence the volcano science project everybody in here has probably had to do at least once with their children. And this is based on the laws of chemistry. Let's say that if I put sprouts in the ground, give them rich soil, water, and sun, the laws of biology determine that I'm going to see them sprout, unless something goes wrong. When something doesn't sprout, what do we tell ourselves? What went wrong? These are the laws of nature. Now, they don't just apply to inanimate objects. One of the most highly correlated events in behavioral sciences is that a child without a father, for example, a fatherless child, has a very higher rate of anxiety, depression, and juvenile crime rates, right? This is part of what we do observe in the realm of psychology. So I grew up without a father, and I'm not a psychopath, so there are exceptions. However, there's a definite trend in psychology. That's why we have the science of psychology. It's a Bachelor of Science. Go to when my wife and I were honeymooning in the Cayman Islands many years ago, 20 years ago actually this summer, we noticed that we're walking down the street and I'm like, wait a second, there's every bank known to man is on this street. Royal Bank, TD Bank, all the European banks, the American banks, the Canadian banks from all over the world are there. Well, why would that be? Well, it's a tax haven. So everyone wants to keep their money where it can't be taxed, especially our politicians, by the way. We found that out through the Pandora Papers and the Panama Papers. But what is it about people who want to keep more of the fruit of their labor, right? This is the law of economics. There are literally iron laws of economics that we've observed by watching the pattern of human behavior. If you reward something monetarily, you get more of it. It's called an iron law of economics. So we determine everything in life, our belief systems about the world, the natural and psychological, are based on observation. And the longer you've seen something repeat itself over time, the more sure you can be that it's basically a pattern or a law of nature. Now, if we look at kingdoms of the past, everyone familiar with the ancient Egyptian empire, right? In its later stages, in its last stages, which was commonly known as the late kingdom empire of Egypt, the power had consolidated to such a degree that almost everyone lived under the poverty line or just at the poverty line except the upper classes, right? So power over time in every civilization tends to concentrate, power and wealth tends to concentrate in a fewer and fewer number of people within that society. Here is a traditional view of the late kingdom of Egypt's social structure. Now, I don't know if this might be too small, but at the very top in that square is the pharaoh at the top, government officials, nobles, and priests underneath him, then the soldier class who work for the government, and then the scribes who are also tied to government functions. Now, everyone below that was around the poverty level, not what we would call middle class today. So we have rich merchants in our society today. They did not, right? What do you see here as a pattern? If you wanted wealth or power or freedom, you had to be closer and closer to that centralized position of power. And here's an article from Nature. At the very bottom, you'll see it right there. Most ancient Egyptians were on the poverty line, while a handful, an eggshell-thin crust of people, were in fabulous wealth. That is the pattern of history. For example, Rome. Now, before Rome was even an empire under Julius and Augustus Caesar, it was a republic. It was one of our first attempts at decentralizing power. But even then, in its 500 BC to 200 BC stage as a republic, you still saw something very similar to Egypt. At the very top was the emperor, and then the patricians and the senators were next. Senators were at the highest seat of power besides the emperor, like you would see in the US or even in MPs in Canada. And patricians were large-scale landowners, which had been old money, basically. Now, old money and political power were going hand in hand, which is, again, not something new. We see this happening today. But it was still happening back then in its most decentralized form. Rome was still fairly centralized. The equestrian class was essentially the cavalry, so the soldier class for the Roman Empire. So they discovered at this point in history that if you had a lot of horses in your army, you could just run through the foot soldiers in the other army. So technological advancements in warfare was the equestrian class. So they were basically the government workers. Again, this is the socioeconomic scale of the Roman Empire. Anyone who wants wealth and power had to be closer and closer to centralized power. And power always centralized. As the Roman Empire went from this to an actual Caesar-led empire, a dictatorship, this accentuated. Again, things can start nice, but over and over again, they always end with centralized power. What about medieval Europe? If we look at its power structure, in the Middle Ages, under the church, so the Pope was sort of the head of the civilization. Under him were monarchs. I understand it in reality that it was more complex than that, but essentially this was the picture. Then you had government nobles, and you had knights who were the warrior class of the government structure, and vassals. So again, the top of the pyramid socioeconomically was the closer you are to centralized power, the more you are wealthy, free, and yourself have some degree of power. So you look at any of the 36 major world empires we've had in history, you'll see this basic pattern repeating itself. It's without exception. It's like forming the rules of psychology. You have to look at patterns and say, this is a trend. This is a trend. Now, there has been an exception, and it did happen somewhat recently. Does anybody know who this is? Who's that? No. This is Madam C.J. Walker. She was born in Louisiana in 1867, so right after slavery was abolished in the U.S. But she was the daughter of freed slaves. So she, like we saw in the other pyramids, who was at the very bottom all the way across? Slaves. And they stayed there, by the way. They stayed there. Now, within her lifetime, she started a cosmetic line, and she became the world's first self-made black female millionaire, right? Right after slavery. So the free market opened up for the southern states, and those of you who were here at the critical race theory lecture realize that the majority of the states never had slavery. They were freed states. But the southern states where she was born, within her lifetime, the slave class shot to a millionaire in the late 1800s is a multi-hundreds plus millionaire today. It's Oprah Winfrey levels, right? Andrew Carnegie. So born in absolute poverty, rose to be basically the steel magnate of the U.S. The amount of wealth he had in those days, dollars, again, we're talking he's a billionaire in our day, right? From poverty, one generation to the top of the food chain. And a lady born to a single mom in Mississippi rose to be the first self-made black female billionaire in history, Oprah Winfrey. Now, if you asked any person, any kid in the U.S., hey, would you rather be? Would you rather be the senator to Wyoming, or would you rather be Michael Jordan? What is the value structure in people who live in the West, right? We're not after positions of power because we don't need them to get what we want. Traditionally, why would people climb the ladder within government structures like in Rome, Egypt, and so forth? To get what we all really want, which is money, freedom, respect, and power. So a curious thing happened in the US and Canada in the 18 and 1900s. So if you were to classify a structure of who were the upper, middle, and lower classes in our civilization of the last 200 years, unlike those graphs we showed you of Egypt and Rome and medieval Europe, you wouldn't see proximity to government power as the upper classes. You would see income, right? Income got you that degree of freedom without being connected in any way to government power. That is unique. Now, I understand. Anybody watching at home here is biting their lips saying, but there's such a corporatocracy and oligarchy going on. Yes, I understand that. But there's also a truth to this, which happened to a degree in our neck of the woods recently, to a degree that has never happened before in history. Okay, now, why is that? Why was the Western civilization revolutionary in its outcome, right? It built itself differently. Now, first of all, we came over here, there was no established European society. We put it, there was nobody here as an aristocracy or a monarchy. It was sort of a clean slate. There was the the Indigenous American Wars. We worked that out to some degree, but we came here, there was no planted civilization like there was in Europe. We started something new. And the triad, the revolutionary triad of the West was, number one, economies work according to free markets. So if you look at centralized power, do you think the Pharaoh cared if if the free market offered something better in terms of leadership than him? No, the Pharaoh was not going to give up power, right? In a sense, a democracy or a representative republic like the U.S., people can present themselves to be your leaders and you get to choose, right? Theoretically. And if you go to the market to purchase something, you get to choose. You don't just get what the Pharaoh wants you to buy. Okay, so an absolute free market serves the consumer where two individual companies try and compete for your dollar. It puts pressure on prices to stay low and quality to go up. You remove a free market, look at any monopoly, what happens to the product in terms of cost and quality? It goes the other way. So free markets was a huge revolution, but we realized that the founders of our civilization said this is part of the natural fabric of civilizational law, civilizational psychology. The same way a good psychologist counseling as a family therapist would say, look, there are certain things you can do within your family that will promote flourishing every time, and there are certain things you can do that will be abusive every time. You can ignore the laws of psychology, but you cannot avoid its consequences. Same thing with psychology on the largest possible scale, which is civilization. Now, free speech. Nothing was off limits. You could actually, believe it or not, you can say fire in a theater. There's no law saying specifically you can't say that, which you cannot do in the U.S. The U.S. is the only country on earth that to this point has essentially, at least on paper, absolute free speech. You cannot incite to violence. Like if I stand up and I say, let's say as a prominent person in my, or as a journalist, or even as a citizen, if I say, okay, everyone, I want to go and beat such and such. Everyone attack him. I could be sued for that, right? I can be sued for defamation, but it's very hard to prove. But essentially, if I just speak my political opinion or my religious opinion, for the majority of the last 200 years in the U.S. specifically, there is no recourse that my government has, at least on paper. The rules do not allow them to come after me for speech. Now we're starting, as those of us who are in this room who think the way that we do, we're starting to miss the days of unmitigated free speech, aren't we? We all can feel that noose tightening, and of course the people tightening the noose tell us it's for our own good. They're not really tightening the noose, and our neighbors who are sitting there going, well, I'm okay with this because it's just for our safety. Safety for your safety is a common rallying cry of the soft march towards tyranny. It's happened in every descent into autocratic rule in all of history. You can look it up. Different flavor, same dish. Private property. Government can't take it away from you. Government can't regulate it. And it is yours, and if it becomes very fruitful, good for you. You're not responsible for the guy next to you. This is in direct opposition. As we'll see, this is the main triad, revolutionary triad of the West. And you'll see that every time somebody comes in with anti-Western values, it will contradict every single one of those tenets. How often do we hear that it's not fair that someone's private property, business, home, real estate, whatever, is so much better than that guy, the neighbor? We have to do what? What's the big rallying cry in socialism? Equity, exactly. Financial equity. And again, it sounds good, doesn't it? I mean, look at Jimmy with his Lamborghini and his horse ranch, and then I got Susie over here, single mom, can hardly pay the bills. Is that what God would want? Right? You can sell it fairly easily if you appeal to people's superficial moral compasses. Now, even in the last 200 years, not everyone went to the revolution of the West. Matter of fact, Eastern Europe, which is right next door to Western Europe, and Western Europe sent the pilgrims over to America who started this revolution, this Western Revolution. Well, they went the other way. They got rid of their monarchs too, like we did. However, they replaced their monarch, the czars, with dozens, if not hundreds of mini-czars called autocrats, bureaucrats, communist party members. And it turns out that when you centralized power even more, what happens to the problems you have with centralized power? They get worse. So the trend in the east of Europe was to go the opposite direction that the West went. And we've seen the results play out over the last century. During the Tsarist period, as oppressive as it was, the Russian farming system produced a net surplus of wheat most years, and they were a net exporter of agriculture in Russia. By the 1960s, and even earlier than that, what was happening in Russia? Were they producing enough bread? No, they had to stand in line to get their own bread because central control had given the idea to the central planners, and central planning and central control is a common theme that you'll hear over and over again tonight. It's a polite way of saying a monarch or a pharaoh. It's the same exact seat of power. And essentially they'd say, well, you know what? We're going to do things better according to the imagination of a small group of social central planners. In China, Mao, who saw the Russians do what they did, now remember, the Russians had created a famine, not only in the Ukraine, but in parts of Russia. In the 40s and 50s, you could see posters in Russia that said, it's wrong to eat your children. Okay? Imagine having to be, the populace being so hungry that you have to remind them that there's a moral law up and above you starving. Chairman Mao, he looked around, he said, hey, look at the West. They're doing great. They've had the Industrial Revolution in the 18, and early 1900s. They're way ahead of us. We're basically a poor farming nation. So I know what we're going to do, says Mao, with all the good intentions in the world, let's say. I don't think these people have necessarily good intentions, but for the sake of argument, I will put on them the mantle of having nothing but good intention. So he says, well, in 5 years, I don't know where he got the number, but in his mind and his advisors and the Leninists that Russia was sending over to help them socially engineer China's revolution, they came up with the notion that what took the West over 100 years to do slowly, organically, according to free markets, they were going to do it in 5 years. They were going to have an industrial revolution the size and scope of the West in a much larger population, which is China, in 5 years. Just that math is insane if you stop and think about it. But this is what happens in closed doors when central planners are disconnected from none of these guys were farmers. Do you think the farmers would have said, oh yeah, no problem, right? Or the industrialists who actually had built factories, run factories in the West, do you think if they'd have come over and been in this room while they were planning this, that they would have been like, thumbs up, buddy, I can't believe we didn't think of it. Why did we take 100 years to do this? You're so smart. No, because what happens in a free market is things change slowly, innovatively, one innovation at a time. Someone invents the printing press. You know what? I want one of those for my publishing company, because when you use a printing press, you can just smack out literature at a higher rate than ever before. I don't have to pay a team of scribes who are prone to making error. I can use a printing press. And now that aspect of that industry is forever changed, so on and so forth, layer by layer, throughout 100+ years. That's how these things happen. They cannot be forced into existence just because someone wants them to. Because what had actually happened, did he succeed in his great leap forward? No, the only thing he succeeded in before the 5 years was up was the Great Famine. The largest scale recorded famine in human history, where upwards of 50 million at least Chinese people died. And yet again, what went missing during these famine years? Children. People would just start taking and eating other people's babies. So these central planners always promise what? Heaven on earth. What do they always deliver without exception? Hell on earth. There are no exceptions. And there's a very, very simple reason for that. A more recent and proximity idea or example of this was Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. Before Hugo Chavez came on the scene in 1999, what was the richest country in South America? Yes, Venezuela. Why? Largest on earth to this day offshore oil reserves on planet Earth. And private companies were coming in there on the free market, doing great business. What did he promise? Where did the term democratic socialism first ever emerge in the last 20, 30 years? This man. He promised people even more than what the free market was delivering. Did he deliver on that promise? He nationalized most of the offshore companies. He nationalized more and more of the industries within Venezuela. And by about 2018, 14% of Venezuela had to walk out of the country on foot because they couldn't afford to drive. They cleaned out the zoos. I'm not sure they quite got to eating children, but they ate zoo animals. They cleared out the zoos. You could not find cats or dogs on the street because they were hunted for food. And as of 2 years ago, 1 cup of coffee, they printed so much money, which is what failing economies always do, that in 2 years ago, a cup of coffee was 1 billion bolivars. Okay? That's how worthless the money became. Imagine having saved up 150,000 bolivars, hardworking guy your whole life, and this central planner comes along, and within 10 years, you don't even have enough to buy a cracker. Okay? This is what happens under central control. So the authoritarian drift is a word you'll see. There's books written about this. It's a fairly common sociological observation when you look at civilizations over time. They drift towards more corruption, centralized power, centralized control, without exception. Without exception. Now, when you hear things, here's a curious phenomenon. We hear about these problems recently on the left-hand side there. Climate change, you've heard of that being a problem, and they're going to keep using, that's the next big hammer. COVID, I think, is pretty much over. Climate change is about to be the real hammer they hit us with. That's my prediction. COVID-19, racial equity, etc. What just happens to be the solution for every single one of those problems when you really look at what they're proposing? More centralized power, aka Marxism, socialism. Marxism is essentially the most atheistic political theory we've ever devised. And if those of you have been to my Great Reset lecture, I use the example of an ant colony. Okay, the leafcutter ant colony is incredibly complex. It's got 15 feet subterranean complexes with fungal farms the size of footballs, refuse bags the size of sleeping bags. Not a single ant knows how it works. Not a single one. It is a top-down design civilization. Theistic political theory, like in the West, said, you know what? Like an ant colony, there's order and structure to human civilization that we don't understand. We just got to get out of the way and let it play out. We got to follow natural, God-given laws of civilization, freedom of speech and movement, private property. If I work, I get. If I don't work, I don't get. And free markets. It's a little more complicated than that, but that was the essential because we knew, we trusted that this boat wasn't careening endlessly off a cliff. It was human civilization is a designed super machine by a super intelligence. We believe that. We put it into practice. And I think we got results worth comparing to autocratic, Leninist, Maoist, Marxist civilizations. I'm confident going forward that which civilization I want. Now, a modern day example of centralized power or the attempt to form a central ideology would be the World Economic Forum. Now, people always, my left-leaning friends will say, I've even heard a lot of, unfortunately, some conservative politicians poo-poo the idea that these guys have absolute power. You're treating these guys like they're the Death Star and the Emperor. No, I'm not. I don't know what kind of power they do or don't have, and I don't care. But all the corporate leadership of planet Earth and the leaders of the largest economies on planet Earth get together once a year in Davos to tell us what they believe about their industry. So I don't care if they have actual power, you can force people to, I don't know. Probably not. But what we need to pay attention is to what they believe when they get together to tell us what they want to do. I just care about the ideology. What is the ideology, and is it good? And you'll see, we're going to look at some highlights, aka lowlights, of the event in the next few minutes. It was founded by Klaus Schwab on January 24th, 1971, and it meets every year in Davos, Switzerland. And essentially, it's, like I said, it's the elites getting together to do a public showing. I don't know if they're trying to sell us or other elites on what their vision for the future is. Central planners always think, because remember, in an atheistic political theory, we live in a chaotic world that's not necessarily designed or purposed for anything. And there's chaos. What is the closest thing to a godlike system you can have in that kind of a universe? The human mind, human rationale. So that is literally the savior. So it must come together, and these people may have all the best intentions on earth. But how does the saying go? The road to what? Hell is paved with good intentions. It doesn't matter what your intentions are. I can have a drunk, cognitively impaired surgeon who is on drugs thinking they know what they're doing and wanting to help me, but I'm going to be sitting there freaking out, right? It's not about intention. It's about procedure and results. So, now they get together and they sit there and they go, okay, well, this is what we think. Now, in a theistic political theory, this world is designed on purpose, with structure, and it's a perfectly working machine from a theistic perspective. Because where the product, matter, is organized and put forth by a mind. Ultimate, errorless rationale in the mind of a supreme being. And Christians aren't the only ones who believe that. What is the only source of chaos in the Christian theistic perspective? The human mind. Their savior is our devil. So if you build a society on the devil, so to speak, what are you going to get, right? And have we had a chance ever to try the two theories out side by side? Yes. It's called Eastern Europe and Asia and Western civilization. So now here, the first thing I'm going to show you. So this happened last week. There's a journalist who's a fairly right-wing journalist called Jack Posobiec. They knew he was coming there. He has a right-wing perspective. He lands in Davos, Switzerland, and he's more or less immediately surrounded by Swiss police. And I'll just show you a quick video.
Excuse me, can I ask you why you're detaining this journalist?
Can you put the phone away, please?
Can I ask you why you're detaining this journalist?
I don't answer your question.
Is it we're not
Please
able
put your
to
phone away.
report here?
Please put the phone away.
Okay. Can I ask you guys
Yeah,
why
you
you're
can.
being
Can you?
detained?
Yeah, can you please stop filming? Then we can talk.
Why do I need to stop filming?
Because I ask you to. It's my personal right because I don't like to be filmed.
Okay.
And it's a right in Switzerland. If I don't want to
But
be
can
filmed.
I ask why he's being detained then? I won't point the camera at you then. I won't film you, but I would like to know why this journalist is being detained on public property.
What's detained? Can you explain
How
the
come
word?
he's being surrounded right now? Is he
Uh-huh.
allowed to leave the area?
We're just making a normal police control because it's WEF. Everything is
Is there a
very
reason
sensitive.
he specifically was targeted?
There is a reason because we have to have a reason to control a
What was the
person.
reason? What was he doing?
I don't have to tell you that. Why are you asking me that?
Because this is, he's, there's many journalists here, and I want to
Yeah,
know
I
why
know.
he specifically is being detained.
There is a reason, but everything is clear now, and we're about to leave in just a few seconds.
Thank you.
Okay? Yeah. Could you please now? Can I ask you please to delete your?
That's interesting. Delete, don't film me. Delete your video. Nothing to see here. Now just switch that around for me for a second. Let's say the PPC and other more right-wing parties in Canada were having a conference every year. And a completely lawful member of CNN, journalist, went to there and police swarmed him. They never detained him or arrested him, by the way. But is that not a sort of sense of intimidation behind all of that? Do you think that would fly? Or even make it a more stark example. Let's say the only black journalist at a gathering was the only one that was harassed. And when a black other journalist came to ask what was going on, they were told, put the camera down, delete what you're filming. How would that fly? And what's interesting too is, if you look at the patches on the police involved in this incident, there's a World Economic Forum police. Now, it turns out they're not actually a World Economic Forum police. This is a patch put on Davos Police Department officers who are assigned to the World Economic Forum. But still, can you imagine a PPC police or an OBC police with an official patch on the Victoria Police as they came and, for no reason, basically soft harassed journalists who had a different opinion? Would we be okay with that as free-thinking, critical thinking, open-minded, pro-Western values, liberal thinkers, classic liberal thinkers? No, we're not okay with that. We want diversity of opinion in the free market of ideas. And it's not just a free market of business and choosing your leaders that centralized controllers don't want to have a free market in. They don't want a free market of ideas. Go to a university. Can you be a university professor and buck the narrative in any Western university on gender identity, climate change, racial equity, etc.? Good luck. You're certainly not going to be employed. Maybe if you quietly believe that as a math teacher in the corner of the math wing, but as a social studies professor, good luck. There is no diversity of opinion in their world. Now, this next gentleman who has the unfortunate fact of looking like a Bond villain and sounding like a Bond villain, there are two ideas. One of them he's going to talk about right here. There are two ideas that have come out of his books. In 2015, he wrote a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, what was the first industrial revolution? That was combustible engine, steam engine. It allowed us to manufacture things en masse without humans having to do it by hand. That was the first industrial revolution. Now, that happened organically. People said, you know what, I want one of those. And it transformed our industries. The second revolution was train tracks and telegraph. So communications and transportation of goods went high speed compared to what we'd been used to pulling things by horse and buggy or boat. So the difference in the speed of that transition is greater than what we've ever experienced in our lifetime. We've gotten faster jets and stuff like that, but not at the rate of from horse to train, right? That was the second industrial. The third industrial revolution was computerized technology. That changed everything. The fourth, but all of these revolutions happened organically, slowly over time, with people free will deciding, I want an iPhone. I will spend my money to buy an iPhone or an Android phone because I like it. Those types of transformations and revolutions in the industry are natural, based on free markets. Their fourth industrial revolution is anything but waiting for us to adopt good ideas. And as you'll see, because that bleeds into what he's about to talk about, which is called stakeholder capitalism. Now, by the way, their vision, and you see this in his book, in his 2015 book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, what they have in mind is a fusion of humans with technology and highly centralized data collection of our private information. So we become drugged up cyborgs under their direct control. And I'm exaggerating, but not really. If you read the book, you're kind of like, that's kind of a dystopia. Their version of heaven is my version of hell. And we've all seen the previous, I think it was 2 conferences ago, they put out a commercial. The World Economic Forum put out a commercial. You will own nothing and be happy. Is that not the exact opposite of private property? And they want us not eating meat, which is what I choose to eat. They want us eating what? Bugs. That's when I do something about it. It's a live stream. I can't say anything else about that. So what you see these people do who take this role, and what you're about to hear is one of the most sinister 1 minutes of video I've seen in a long time. And I hope you can pick up on what I pick up on. These people, without realizing it, slowly drift towards more and more central control. And with computerized, with artificial intelligence, algorithms, digital currency, all that stuff, they're reaching levels of power in these centralized governments that has never happened in history, right? At least kings back in the old days, they don't know if you're avoiding taxes, right? The future they're proposing and they want to see come to fruition is one of more control that has ever been seen in human history. And they are taking roles of socially engineering more and more of our private lives. What do you see happening in that circumstance? It's a man or a group of men approaching godhood. Because if God does not exist, someone has to do his job. Because this is a chaotic world. And so people, with all the good intentions in the world, but if an ant took over an ant colony, which even humans don't have the intelligence to do without destroying it, what's going to happen to that ant colony? So what happens to central planning if it gets even more centralized and more powerful based on the theories of fewer and fewer people? It disconnects itself from nature, which is God's domain, and we have a complete it's like letting a 4-year-old fix your car. It's even worse than that. Let's watch this video.
Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the states of the world. But 2 conditions are necessary. The first one is that we act all as stakeholders of larger communities, that we serve not our only self-interests, but we serve the community. That's what we call stakeholder responsibility. And second, that we collaborate. And this is the reason why you find many opportunities here during the meeting to engage into very action and impact-oriented initiatives to make progress related to specific issues on the global agenda.
Throw a robe on that guy. Isn't that Emperor Palpatine? Did you get that? The future isn't going to just happen according to innovation coming from the free markets. It belongs, or it's organized by us. Who's us? We the people? No, the people in that room, the elites. They are going to gerrymander and socially engineer what the future should look like according to their imagination. That is frightening. And the fact that he can unironically stand there looking and sounding like a supervillain, speaking in an auditorium and with the kind of zeal and passion for total control. And when he says we have the means, he knows what he's talking about. He's talking about the future of digital currency. We're already tracked beyond measure compared to previous generations. You know, I mean, how many of you have said something unusual and the next day your Facebook feed is filled with that product, right? These algorithms are already out in play, not necessarily looking to control you, but they're there. The tracking of our behavior has already started, right? Who here, what was that Netflix special called, it was on the whole procedure, the fact that we all of us here, from nature of using the internet for years, have a sort of algorithm version of our brain out there that is used to track our choices and to use it for marketing purposes, right? These people understand what they're talking about when they say we now have the means to do something we've never been able to do. Do they want more control? Do they want more private property? Do they want more free markets where you get to decide what you individually want for your family? No, they're going in the exact opposite direction. And these are the most powerful people on earth that he's talking to, who have more power and wealth than anybody's ever had in history. This meeting of minds, if they can lock in a shared ideology, which I think there's evidence that they have already done so, they don't need any extra special power other than they all believe in the same vision of the future. So let's listen to what else they have in store for us. This is the Vice Chancellor. And by the way, one thing you'll see over and over again, everyone here has heard of ESG, right? ESG scores, environmental, social, and governance goals that are, this is not my acronym, this is their acronym. And they're saying all future business and countries should have a proper environmental, social, and governance goals that we all share. And who shares this? The elites. Environmental. If a pandemic that kills, I think now we've figured it kills less than 1%, if you get it, on average, less than 1% of people die from COVID. If that's bad enough to lock a planet down, how about a disease like climate change that kills everything and everybody? If they can gin up fear for COVID on the degree to get the degree of lockdowns they did, what do you think they can generate in terms of response from something that they would consider multiple times worse, an earth-ending or earth extinction-sized event called climate change? So now, does your company, and banks in the US have started to give or take away loans based on your ESG goals as a company. You could be a completely viable company in the free market with a track record, but if you don't have environmental goals that line up with their ideology, they're starting to actually refuse loans on a large scale, based on the notion that the climate change we're witnessing is man-made primarily, and we're on the edge of the precipice. So they're going to say to you, is your business can you show me the plan for your business where all your energy consumption, all your company cars will be electric vehicles by 2032? Because if you can't, we can't give you money. Stuff like that. Stuff that would kill most middle and small-sized businesses. It will kill even large-sized businesses. Social goals. Do you have a black transgender one-armed lesbian on your chair of your private Christian school? Well, that's a problem. Now you're going to start getting dinged on your ESG goals. Things like that. So this is the Vice Chancellor of Germany. His name is Robert Habeck. And listen to what he says.
First of all, I would say that we have to stick to global markets. If we are now, and this is a tendency I feel everywhere in the world, also in my country as well, also in Europe, if we are now saying, okay, first of all, Germany and other countries are caring for themselves, then we will increase the crisis. If we are only caring for our own food supply or energy supply, it must have a disastrous effect on the prices on the market. So first of all, we have to keep the markets open. Second, we have to see that we have to solve one problem, not on the back of another one. So if we are now increasing the production of fossil fuels and coal power plants all over the place, there's a drought in India. You mentioned it. We will definitely have more problems in the next years to come. So we have to see that climate neutrality, the big issue of the conference 2020, so 2 years ago, it seems like ages, but 2 years ago, it's not gone. So we have to solve one problem with the solutions of the other problem. And third of all, when I mentioned open markets, I like to stress out that the rules of the markets, they have to change. So the globalization, I think deglobalization is a wrong phrase. We shouldn't admit to that. We have to stick that we collaborate in one world and have some solidarity in the world, but therefore we have to change the rule of the markets as well. So these three things, I would say, give an idea where we have to heed to, and maybe this conference can also lead some ways into a more sustainable future.
So did you catch that? If we solve the climate needs of Germans, this is the German vice chancellor, nationalism is dead for these guys' minds. We might create climate change problem that could affect Indian farmers in 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 15 years. That's not good enough. We will sacrifice the needs of Germans for the greater good of the planet, according to their version of climate change. This is a proposed theory that man-made activity is driving the climate that fast, that hard, which every prediction they've given us as to when the world's going to end, they have a worse track record than Jehovah's Witnesses in predicting the end of the world, right? So these guys, this is the vice chancellor of Germany saying, I'm going to sacrifice the cheap energy needs of middle class and lower class Germans. I don't care if single moms can't drive to soccer practice anymore. I'm looking at the bigger picture. And when they say words like open market and global market, what word are they averting, is he avoiding there? Free market. The simple free market that has built the West. They got fancy terms, but they are very specific about why they're changing the terminology. All right, if your hair hasn't gone white enough yet, here's another chance.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Oh, goody. I can't wait. This is the CEO of Alibaba. Okay, that Alibaba is the Amazon of the Asian world. It's a huge company. They're fast tracking, and I'm sure they're not the only ones, a system where you can choose to plug into, and guess what? The food you eat, the ways you travel give you a carbon score. What could possibly go wrong? Because no one would ever, the government would never overtake that data. No, they're going to leave our autonomy untouched. And if we move to a digital currency, well, we saw our government shut down single moms who gave $40 to the truck convoy, shut their bank accounts down. Even now, they'll never use that power for evil in the future, will they? So you go to take your kid to her specialist appointment, car won't start. Why? Your ESG score isn't high. Your carbon consumption's already maxed out. So now you got to find another way to get your daughter to her ballet or her medical doctor's appointments. That's centralized control on a scale I don't want in my life, right? Has central planning ever gone wrong, like horribly wrong in history? Can you imagine the kind of wrong that could happen with this level of central planning? It's levels above what we've experienced in the past. Okay, here's some more fun. This is the CEO of Pfizer, wonderful, heartfelt company that has your own benefit at the highest principle in their mind. Nothing to worry about what Pfizer's up to. Take a listen to this gem.
It is basically biological chip that it is in the tablet. And once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet. So imagine the applications of that, the compliance, the insurance companies to know that the medicines that patients should take, they do take them. It is fascinating what happens in this field.
Oh, fascinating. Fascinating. So now, did you take your pills? They'll know, right? And like you said, compliance. Do they have to pick these evil-sounding people to promote their ideas? Do they not know what it looks like to us on the world stage? So, okay, so let's say a future in which there's digital currency, the government has absolute control over every pack of gum you buy, every aspirin you purchase, and they know whether or not you're taking your medication. Well, combine that with another wave of mandates for a certain medication. What could go wrong? I'll let you think about that tonight as you try to go to sleep. This is, and I love all these people, like this is Kirsten Brathen. Did I butcher her name there? This is Kirsten Brathen, the Norwegian CEO of finance. Now, I'd be curious to know, who was it? I think it was Elon Musk said, a high school drug dealer knows more about business than most business teachers in a college. Right? Totally true. If you've never run a business, you have no business teaching business. Okay? There are mechanics to the real world of commerce that you learn from running a lemonade stand, right? That they can talk you out of in a college textbook, right? The saying, I think it was Thomas Jefferson, he had said, way back then in the US, they were going to bring a bunch of expert and economic experts to form certain amendments to the Constitution. He said, absolutely no experts. Thank you very much. I want the farmers here. I want people who have real-world, day-to-day, survival-based knowledge of the commerce. That's the way to go. Free market, real experience, individual private property results. So I'd like to know her background, but something tells me she's a lifelong academic. Okay, they tend, and you put them in positions where their little imaginations disconnected from reality. There's a Celtic proverb. It says the plowman is wiser in the essentials than the professor. So when you go to gerrymander and socially engineer commerce, and you don't know anything about the basics of business, that's a recipe for disaster. Hear her here, get us prepared. Now, when they tell us, usually how do they sell us their ideas? It's going to be a wonderful future. It's going to be better than anything you've ever had before. Turns out it's never anything but hell on earth. So when they tell you, when they lead by telling you, this is going to hurt, not good.
We need to accept that there will be some pain in the process. The pace that we need will open up for missteps. It will open up for shortages on energy. It will create inflationary pressures, and maybe we need to start talking about that pain is actually worth it, because if we don't, there's no business case, there's no economy, there's no welfare. But so far, I think we have been a little bit careful actually talking about the pain in the short term that is likely to come from this very important change.
Yeah. So we haven't quite been up front about the pain in the short term, but it's worth it. It's worth it. I don't think so. And again, these elites, $10 a gallon for them, they'll survive. What about middle class, lower class people, which makes the majority of the population? How are they going to do? At the very least, you'll not be going to restaurants. You're not going to be buying new clothes. You'll be biking everywhere. You'll be eating your bugs. This is the last clip. Now, this one's a doozy. I left it for the last. Another woman she's the head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which, by the way, in the Great Reset lecture on this YouTube channel, I talk about the IMF was created in Bretton Woods in 1944 when the world currency was decided to be resting on the US dollar. They were going to create a special, world dollar, but they ended up, at the time, the US economy was 50% of the world's GDP. And 2/3 of all gold was in the US borders. So they said, let's make it a gold-backed US dollar. But we're going to create something called the International Monetary Fund to make sure we put money from rich countries towards less fortunate countries. It was the first real major step in socialized financing. At the time, it was conservatively done. It had some merit to it. But over time, it's grown completely out of control. This is the head of the International Monetary Fund. Okay, I'm going to break this video up into 2 parts. It's just a couple minutes long. Unbelievable. Unbelievable what's said here.
On this one, of course, it is very difficult. This is why for a whole decade we would be in meetings, Francois and me, and there would be discussion about a tax deal, and I frankly would switch off because I know nothing is going to come out of it. But now there is a renewed sense that there has to be more fairness and that taxation matters, and if we are not able to fix it, then we would be all poorer because we would be more fragmented. And that gives a bit of a chance for a tax deal. Maybe it would be somewhat modified. Maybe you're right, David, and nothing is going to happen. But in my lifetime, this is the best moment we have had. And it is on the basis of wanting to have a world economy that works better for majority of countries and people, not just for the few.
I agree with you. Look, it's a good thing. I applaud people that worked on it, but my experience is that what motivates humans and all beings, species, is one, staying alive, eating, shelter, reproduction, and tax avoidance. And tax avoidance is one of the great motivators of human life, and I just worry that it won't be able to be implemented so well.
Look, we can talk about that all night long because we have 3 minutes. Adam Smith, going back to the father of the market economy, what did he say? What do we need for a country from a mess to turn into a prosperous country? We need peace, low taxes, and rule of law. So I'm all for low taxes, but I'm against income from poor countries being sucked into rich countries, leaving the problem you asked me about unaddressed. And
okay. So she's saying, first of all, she was saying, I believe in the free market economies that have been established over years. The low taxes, peace, and rule of law. Rule of law meaning no one has higher favor in a society, not politicians. We're all equal under the rule of law, and we have more reward for our effort. That is a thriving, driving force of a healthy economy. But, and when he says people avoid taxes like with the same level of instinct as they survive, and she just waves her hand like, oh, this is the problem with central planners. They ignore basic reality. Now, of course, she doesn't care because with a digital currency, if it ever comes, you'll be paying your taxes on time, every time, okay? So that's not, but the problem is they see us as paying too little tax. And because they have to fund something on such a large scale, this is the International Monetary Fund, it was birthed as a socialist financial system, is about to hit that next level. And I love how she puts it. She goes, so she's tired of rich countries taking money out of poorer countries. What she means is countries in the US who have corporations who manufacture their goods in poorer countries like rural China and India. Is that taking money out of those countries? No, it's creating jobs that otherwise didn't exist. As much as they're below our standard of living, if you ask them, are they happy to have a Nike plant there? Basically, it's been a net improvement of their social. Now, I believe, by the way, I'm against offshore manufacturing for the simple fact that it destroys the economy here at home. The irony of all this, she's proposing to, how is she going to fix this? She's going to tax corporations, essentially, for saving money, and then take that tax from the corporation and give it to those poor countries to increase their wages. The very thing that would happen if they manufactured back here at home, where wages would go up to match the standard of living we have to have here, would happen under a more nationalistic policy of business, not a globalist one. Say what you want about Trump, but one of his protocols was to tax corporations who were producing overseas, to incentivize them to bring manufacturing back here, right? Which would cause a boom in this economy because he was a nationalist. And if China was not a communist dictatorship and they absorbed the same values that made the West great economically and prosperously and freedom-wise, private property, free markets, freedom, which is the last thing the Communist Party will ever do, they would have the results she's theorizing by increasing globalization, which is the very problem that caused that in the first place. The immensity, the depth of their ignorance is frightening. It would be funny if they weren't in such positions of power, and if they didn't, what? All think alike. Anybody dissent? I would like to hear who was the dissenting voice in this whole WEF forum last week. Anybody stand up and say, you guys are insane? No, because they're not invited, okay? It's a uniform, monolith vision of the future based on anti-Western, atheistic political theory and financial theory. She gets even crazier here. Oops, sorry. I'm going to get right to this.
On this one, Of course, it is very difficult. This is why, for a whole decade, we would be in meetings, Francois and me, and there would be discussion about.
Well, of course, my boomer self has to screw up the. Well, anyways, she goes on to say this about cryptocurrency. Then they start talking about cryptocurrency. She goes, the problem with Bitcoin is it's backed by nothing. She picks Bitcoin for a specific reason. But crypto in general, she says, is backed by nothing. Whereas stablecoin, which is a precursor to digital currency that's being put out by governments, stablecoin is a cryptocurrency that has a one-to-one relationship to a dollar. That's asset-backed, she says. That's insane. Fiat currency, and she goes on to say that crypto is a pyramid scheme because it's based on nothing. The reality is, what is the greatest monetary Ponzi scheme going right now? Fiat currency, because why? It is literally based on nothing. The very thing she says is wrong about Bitcoin. It's 100% true of fiat currency. So you can base anything you want on fiat currency, like stablecoin, you can call it whatever you want. It is the very thing she says in this moment is what's wrong with currency. The irony of that, she does not understand that. Cryptocurrency, say what you will about it, but something like Bitcoin is decentralized. Another thing she wants is a central control of this new currency, right? Again, what happens when you can centrally control a currency? Somebody now has the power to make more of it. And we get right back to the problem with fiat currency, which is overproduction money printing, which, like in Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, drives the value of your money into the ground. This is the head of the IMF talking like this. If I, a lowly citizen of Canada with an internet connection, can get my hair whitened by her delusions, that's not saying much for her. And I'm saying this out to the free market of ideas. If I'm wrong about what I'm saying and my criticism of what she's saying, prove me wrong. She is off the charts ignorant about money as the head of the International Monetary Fund. This is who we're dealing with, people. This is like Mao being the central farmer of China and driving them. Because what did Mao do to the farmers in his country who had been plugging along for thousands of years, producing surpluses? He put them away. He said, no more private property farms. You're all going to get together in 20,000 groups of your best friends, and you're going to farm as a commune. Didn't work. We starved to death. So what you're seeing at places like specifically the World Economic Forum, is central planning on the largest possible scale in his history. And this is the logical conclusion to atheistic political theory. Someone or a group of people have got to do what? Tame the chaos in the world. They got to play God's role. And they have to become social engineers over us. And they have to because they have good intentions. And they're the smartest ones, supposedly. Marxist atheistic political theory. Man's mind is the source of order, so it must have full control. Here as Christians, many of us here are Christians, that is literally the anti-version of reality, which is frightening. C.S. Lewis said it best. This is my last slide. Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent, moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. Before he died in 1963. So I'll need a Vanna White. Blaze, can you come up here, please? We're doing a question and answer. So if you have a question, please put your hand up and wait for the mic so that they can hear you on the live stream. Always somebody got to break the ice. Just be that person. Be brave. Right over here.
Hi, I came in late, so I don't even know who you are.
I prefer to remain anonymous. My name is Emmanuel. Parento. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the gathering tonight, the topic?
Yes. Oh, sorry. We reviewed the World Economic Forum
Okay.
for this past week.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you for being that first icebreaker.
Oh, yeah. My question's a small one. It happened earlier in your presentation, but I do believe it was the Egyptian pyramid scheme that you had, or maybe it was the Roman. But down lower, there was one called pleb something.
Plebeians.
Is that where we get the modern day pleb from?
Yep. Yes.
Ah, okay. That was my question.
Yeah, thank you, Manuel. I just have a question. Like, we are the majority of the people, right? So I think we should meet every year and decide our future. Like you said, free market, free speech, and private property. So we are the majority. It's our life. It's our planet. Nothing stops us from getting together. We have the numbers, and they're not elites. They're a criminal organization, and we also need someone to go and arrest these people. And also, my question is, so how do we disconnect financially?
Yeah, that's, we had a whole talk on it a few weeks ago. I mean, the basic answer is we have to form a parallel economy because the ship that they're on is sinking. They know it's sinking. They know fiat currency is being printed into oblivion. They're doing it on purpose. Every 100 years, the reserve currency of the world changes hands. It's about time for the US dollar to RIP, and especially the way they're dealing with it. So they're going to go, they're not lying. Like one of the things she said at the IMF leader that got cut off, they call it CBDC, Central Banking Digital Currency. That's their replacement reserve currency in the wings. It's waiting in the wings. It's ready to go, right? We get on that, eventually the same thing's going to happen to that because it's not backed by anything. And it's centrally controlled, so it can be you think money printings? At least money printing, you have to print it. Buy the paper, buy the ink, run the machines. Imagine if you just have to push a button to make more of something. It's the inflation and money printing, money creation digitally is going to go through the roof. The only chance we have, amongst other things, just for finances, is to pull our money away from unbacked assets, money, to harder assets, real estate, gold, silver. I personally do believe in Bitcoin. And again, we had a whole lecture on the monetary aspect to it. So that's a parallel economy, bartering, anything but centrally controlled, unbacked liabilities, which is what they're proposing for us.
How about a bank? Can we create our own bank?
We wouldn't have to if we had decentralized crypto, if it's solidly based, cannot be created or destroyed, can only be lost, and it would be exchanged without the need for a bank. The bank would be the medium of exchange, to put it simply. Really right now, I'm gonna start accepting Bitcoin for my business. Because I'm going to do everything. There's ATM Bitcoins now. You're starting to see the rise of Bitcoin as the head of the cryptocurrency lineup. We got to get behind that, I think. Unless you want to start shaving gold and giving it to your barber, right? Which means you don't need barbers, I can tell. But you want to go buy a pair of underwear with a little chip of gold? That's hard to do. It's going to be a lot easier to switch to there's already more and more people are accepting, more and more countries are using Bitcoin as a reserve currency. So there's a chance. I'm not saying go and put your money in Bitcoin. It could all crash. I'm just saying digital currency, uncentrally controlled, having nothing to do with government is the only chance for a true, untouchable, uncontrollable, uncorruptible parallel economy. Yeah, diversification. It's one of the iron laws of economics.
Hi, my name's Leslie Ann. I came here looking for answers because I feel like there's a lot of questions out there. And I'm also looking for action. I want to know how to take action. I want to know where to go to take action. I want to know what to do to take action. I don't want to sit in a church every day or every weekend and have people talk to me. I want to be out there taking action. What do we do?
Do you know what the last lecture's title was? Take action. In that vein, Tuesday nights here, 8:30, We Unify has a meeting every week, and they split up into different groups. They have a legal action group, they have a communications group, and they have a political action committee. They're gearing up to put as many people out for local office, which is coming this fall. This fall, every municipality on the island, I believe, at least the South Island, is the mayor, the council, and the school trustees are up for grabs. We have got to start running and be part of the fabric of politics.
So I already belong to the elections committee at We Unify, and me and a couple other people who shall remain nameless are unsatisfied with the speed at which we're doing this. This is only my personal opinion, everyone, but I don't think we have till October to make changes. I think we need to start making those changes yesterday, and hard and fast changes. We need to stand up now, not in October, because all this stuff that's coming down is going to be here well before October.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And again, I'd be happy to discuss with you afterwards. That's tricky. Like, if we don't go by the existing avenues, we have to start getting innovative and underground. You know what I mean? Like, that's a tough one. I don't know what to tell. I don't know what to tell you on the spot. Right? Sorry. But there comes a point. You make me eat bugs, I'm gonna act quicker. I'm gonna eat politicians. Just kidding. That's metaphorical. Not, well, maybe not.
Oh.
Hold on. Can you just wait till the gentleman, and then I just need you to the mic because nobody else can hear you on the stream or on the recording if you don't have a mic.
Oh yeah, it's me again, Jason Jones. So with this digital currency that they were talking about, you're saying it's waiting to ring. What about the universal basic income? How that's coming down the pipe by our government
Potentially,
and
yeah.
others. So with that, how does inflation? What, did they just magically just sweep it under the rug every time?
They're going to crash the fiat currency and have to jump to a different ship, which will be digital currency. I mean, the only chance we have, if you want to talk about chances, we have to pray. First of all, we got to get on our knees and pray, because no matter no matter stratagem we come up with, no matter how many, like it says in the Psalms, you prepare the horse for war, but the battle belongs to the Lord. We got to strategize. We got to pray like we haven't never prayed before, because it's coming quick, right? I foresee, if it's not climate lockdowns in the next 3 to 4 or 6 months, there's going to be a food shortage problem and a real crashing of the economy very quickly. At which point, that's a speed of change which most people can't cope with, which is where the prayer part comes in.
Yeah. So how would universal basic income, government giving you digital currency, taxing everything?
Whatever money you have saved in liquid form would become that much less valuable.
Yeah.
It's your money in liquid form is like a melting ice block in the sun.
Yeah.
And they're going to put a heater on top of the sun, right? Things like precious metals, at least putting it back in the freezer, whatever's left, right?
Well, yeah.
But then the problem is, if most of your, if they keep printing and spending ad infinitum, there's going to come a point where you have to have some liquid to buy groceries and mortgage and stuff like that. That would be, we're going to all be sitting in a system where we beg the government to come in and take care of us in this new system that they want us to have to adopt. Well, they've got us by the proverbial private parts, in a sense.
So what I was trying to get at is, so they're going to have to, because they're giving you money and then they're going to be taxing that money. So basically they're going to have to just let you circle that money. There's going to be no way of having wealth incline.
Yeah, it's baseless value. You can't create value out of thin air. We're finding that out. Blaze, the lady right here had a question.
just that their talk at the WEF, so they get together, they speak, and then they go back home and do whatever they do. I feel that there's still a lot of people that have no idea about that. And so we're aware. There's a segment of us who are aware of what's going on. I think that there's a lot of people that aren't.
Yeah, which is the very point of these lectures. Hopefully they'll get out. You guys can take the information. You guys are all here very educated. You guys speak up at family dinners and friend circles. We have to make the awareness grow because that's one of the weapons we have. We have to have a diversified approach to this. We can't just have a revolution like the young lady in the back would like, which I'm not against. I mean, the French Revolution happened, right? There comes a point where the people get nasty, right? When you're watching your kids starve, yeah, things change. Then it becomes all outside. All the change at that point goes outside the system. And politicians are gleefully, woefully unaware of the fact that they eventually will be on the proverbial chopping block, right? So yeah, we have got to make this more known. And to have an articulate way, the reason I do these is so we have a recorded version of an articulated, common sense exposure of ideas. I'm not perfect. I'll get some things wrong, but that's why I'm putting it out there saying, hey, let's converse about what I think about what they're saying. They're saying these things. Did I put words in their mouth? No, they're recording themselves, telling us what they plan on doing. Let's discuss what that might look like. Yeah.
With respect to free speech, I heard a really eerie advertisement on the radio this morning, and it was the first time I'd heard it. And it's a campaign by the British Columbia Human Rights Commission. I don't know if you've heard of it. Never accept hate. And they've set up a report line. When they're giving out the telephone number, and they're asking people to phone and report, well, I guess you could report your family, your friends, or whatever, incidents of hate. And I mean, that's obviously so vague and so dangerous. And I looked online just to see what that was all about, and there is a website where it says that the Human Rights Commission is announcing its new campaign, Never Accept Hate. And among the means that it's going to use to squash hate, it includes monitoring and inquiries. So they're coming.
Careful what you post on Facebook.
Yeah.
Do what I did, and that's make it only certain friends can see my posts. And even then, I don't really post anymore. I mean, who here has seen footage in England where police come to people's houses for tweets they made? And then the gentleman in the back afterwards. You got a question?
I do. In conversation with people, you hear one say, well, I'm going to move. I need to leave Canada.
Yep.
And my response is, there are no greener pastures. What's your take on that?
Well, it's funny you should say that because my family has that on the table because my wife and kids are American. So I have a chance. There are currently greener pastures, I would say, not available to everybody. You have to have a way in and money. But those green pastures may not last very long at all. By no means do I think I'm going to a lifelong safety harbor, right? So I'm here now. I'm waiting for God to direct my family. We got to do the best we can as if we can't leave, right? There's a few places on earth still left that are somewhat free.
For how long?
Exactly. It could be 6 months,
Yes.
right? This could be the world could be changing whether we like it or not very soon. The only reason I don't freak out is because God has said, hey, I actually had a moment and I was at work and my brain was just spiraling down to the black hole. And there's a problem, what does Solomon say? The head of the king the head that wears a crown is weary. And I'm no king, but I'm saying when you put knowledge, or what else says in Ecclesiastes? He says, with much knowledge comes much sorrow. And when we're all in here as aware of what's going on, as acutely as we're aware, you can tip the scales to despair, right? And I felt God very clearly tell me, essentially slap me and say, am I the God of, what am I the God of? Of just this little room that you're in? Or your property? That's the extent of my godhood and my sovereignty? No, I am the God of all. And I know exactly what's going on better than you, and I am in full control, and you will be a happy warrior to the end. And that's it. And I just like, it's like being corrected by a father. I'm like, yes, sir. I will not despair. The gentleman back there had a question. Oh, I thought you had a question right there. Did you have a question? Okay.
Hello again. I think we're all aware of what's happening in Sri Lanka, how their government collapsed and they ran out their, president or prime minister and cabinet and everything else. But that's a very tight little country compared to Canada. So I guess I'm asking is, what are your thoughts on the difference, because Canada is so vast? The chaos would be basically limited to Ontario. We're going to be kind of on the other side going, thank God we're BCers. Correct, or?
Well, I mean, are you asking how would we proceed with an armed revolution?
Well, just how vast spaces, if you have any idea.
The biggest barrier to Canadians is not the space. It's the fact that Canadians have a built-in trust in government. When I moved to the States for 8 years, I was like almost shocked, like, you guys really don't like government, do you? And they're like, no, we don't. And this was California. California was more conservative than Canada back then, back when I was there. And I'm like, I started going like, what? But why would you not trust government? They're our friend, right? And then I started learning about history. Actually, 9/11, I became political after 9/11. I was living in the States during 9/11, and I was like, wait a second. We're getting terrorism here now? Like, and at the time, we didn't know if it was going to be a nonstop, more and more terrorist acts. So we're kind of like, what the heck is going on? What was happening usually in the Middle East was now happening at home. So I started going like, I got to brush up on history and politics and all that stuff. And I started going like, wait a second. And it's that famous graph you've probably seen on the internet. It's an inversely proportionate graph. On one end is your knowledge of history on this part. So the higher your knowledge of history, the lower your trust in government is on the bottom graph. And that is a truth. Hence my lecture tonight. Did I answer your question? Sure. Okay. Like I said, the main obstacle in Canada, and it's in the churches too, is Canadians almost put government as like the fourth person of the Holy Trinity, which is insane. We've just had, it's a matter of fact that we've had it easy in Canada because we're America's fur hat. Like no one cares about us. We haven't been in the center of world affairs. We basically run off the U.S. economy in many ways. We have had the luxury of not caring about politics, and our politicians don't make as much money through corruption as, let's say, American and other world leaders. So maybe the pressure for corruption has been slower in Canada, or at least better hidden. I think the main factor holding Canada back would be the fact that not enough people would wake up to the degree that we have until it's too late.
Yeah, mind you, for the woman behind me, she's right. We don't have really.
Yes, sorry, is your mic on?
Yeah, she's right. She said that we don't have time. It's true. We don't really have time. So just a quick thought. Would it be nice if we just seceded? BC is huge, and just disconnect from globalism. We just want to be left alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the closest you can come to that instantly is buy self-sustaining property. Grow your own food. That's the only way to do it like tomorrow.
The only problem with BC separating, which I would love, I would like the island to separate. We could be our own little country. It'd be perfect.
Well, minus Victoria.
Yeah,
We'd have to have to have an armed insurrection in Victoria, right?
Yes.
Who's with me?
And speaking of armed, in my humble opinion, BC is the California of Canada.
Mm.
We cannot get enough British Columbians to say, oh yes, let's leave the rest of the country. And the other problem is with that person whose name shall never be spoken from these lips, who is now creating this ban on arms, which, by the way, I'm not sure if you're all aware, but you cannot defend yourself in your own home. If somebody comes in to rape you, ladies, you cannot pull out a tire iron, never mind a firearm, and kill them. You must leave your home. That is the rule of law here in Canada. And now with Mr. banning arms, it leaves us even more vulnerable. And this is why I get all up. I'm up in arms about something needs to be done now. Now,
Yep.
not tomorrow, not in October.
Yep.
Underground, so be it, whatever, I'm there.
Yep. Just don't post your address. Don't let anybody know.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any way to challenge globalism on a legal level, like in terms of, basing an argument that these globalist organizations are impinging upon our sovereignty as a nation. Has there ever been any kind of arguments to that effect, like that, these are unelected people from other countries influencing our nation? I just wonder if there's any legal solution to any of this stuff.
100% there's a legal case against it, 100%, because none of our charter in Canada and the U.S. Bill of Rights, Constitution allows any sovereign takeover of the country. So legally speaking, we're right. Yeah. Brian Peckford, I think, is taking the government of Canada to court. Mm-hmm. So that's a high-profile guy who's actually putting money where his mouth is. So that's the kind of thing we need somebody to just do it. Mm. That's the problem. We have every right in the book. Yeah. We're standing, like I've always said, since this whole pandemic started, I have not broken the law once, even though I'm seen in some ways as a lawbreaker by my government. I look at my charter, I don't see a law that I've broken this whole time. I see a lot of questionable behavior on the part of my government. And you remember, every line in our charter and in the U.S. Constitution is a cage around my government, not me. Our forefathers said, you know what? Because of authoritarian drift being ubiquitous throughout history, we're going to put shackles on this thing called government, right? So the charter is meant to restrain government, which is why they don't like it. It's a beast that never wants to stop growing.
Yeah, and then when the truckers, for example, protested, they were demonized even though they were standing up for their rights. People just didn't seem to get it, right?
Yeah, I think we're given a season right now where God is watching. Are we going to fight? Mm-hmm. Spiritually and metaphorically. Right? Are enough of the church, he would have saved Sodom and Gomorrah for 10 righteous people, right? Are Canadians going to start praying like they've never prayed before? Are they going to start seeking, solutions from above as well as implementing them horizontally? Are we going to try, we sit by in the era of increased heinousness in abortion in terms of number, late stage performance, etc. I think to some degree God is sitting there going like, you guys outraged? I'm outraged. Are you outraged? Because if you're not outraged, you're part of the problem, and I got to judge the whole lot of you together. It's Molech worship. At least Molech worship, you had to actually see what you were doing and hear your baby's screams. When this sanitized procedure happens nowadays, the mother doesn't even have to be exposed. No one hears the victim scream. It's cowardly as well as horrific. Well, let's wrap it up. We could all mingle in the here and in the foyer. Thank you for coming. We don't have a date scheduled for the next one, but please keep an eye on if you guys can contact me at this email address, I can put you guys on a list and tell you when the next one's going to be. We might be taking a break for the part of the summer. We've been doing these for about 3 months now, but that's subject to change. So thank you, and we'll see you around. Oh, yes, sorry. Okay, hold on. It's going to take a second here. I'll be right with you. I'm going to turn this off too.